You know, I'm right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest things in sports, media, entertainment, entrepreneurship, and so much more. Nick Durst here, along with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, our guest today, like many of our past guests, works for SNY, and he's also big in the wrestling world. And we always love our wrestling guests, and he has so much more to his story, which we'll get into as well.
Yes, he's an Emmy Award winner. He's a broadcaster. He's a podcast host, does a little bit of everything. Went to, well, maybe not a rival school, but one of the Northeast rival schools. So we're very happy to have him on. It's been a long time coming. Very excited about this. We welcome Jon Alba to the show. John, looking good as always. How you feeling?
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. How do I feel? I feel like the New York City weather has really just absolutely destroyed my body the past week or so because it can't figure out what time of the year it wants to be.
Hmm.
So we're fighting through the congestion, but aside from that, it's baseball season. I'm happy. It's WrestleMania season. It's
Yep.
busy, so that's all good.
Cold and rainy, that's for sure. And I'm
Yes.
constantly right now having to check the weather app. What's the first app you're checking in the morning?
The weather app. Very, very much so, the weather app for sure. I'm with you entirely on that.
Yeah, I didn't see what's going on. So you have an interesting story, which we're gonna get into. And it all started back when you were a teenager. At the age of 15, you and Ein Eagle, you had a bit of a relationship, right? So he was your mentor. How did you end up meeting him? Did you go to one of those sports broadcaster camps? And how did he really kind of shape your career early on?
Yeah, yeah. So I knew from a very young age what I wanted to do. I knew when I was 5 years old, April 10th, 1998. I'm watching the Yankee home opener with my mom, and it's a 17-13 final between them and the Athletics. And 17-13 for if you're not a baseball fan, that's a very abnormal score. And in hindsight, we know why it was 17-13, considering it was the year 1998. But I remember turning to my mom and saying something akin to, "I want to talk about that on TV one day," as something akin to that.
Right.
And from that stage, it was pretty much embedded in my brain that that's what I wanted to do. It was a blessing in that sense that I could focus on it, and it was a curse in that it was all I could focus on. But I ended up doing one of those broadcasting programs with Ian Eagle and Bruce Beck when I was 15 years old. And I loved Bruce. I still love Bruce, but I really hit it off with Ian. And to this day, Ian and I are still very close. I texted him before the Final Four, just wishing him luck. And I fully expected him to answer 3 days later. And he answered within like 3 minutes. They were 45 minutes away from tip off. And that's just the kind of person that he is. And I've been very fortunate to get to know Noah really well, who's becoming a superstar in the field and is going to be the next Joe Buck, in my opinion. So, very grateful to having the relationships I have with them, but also I'm really big on sustaining positive relationships across the broadcasting industry because I think that we're all kind of in this together. It's a very uncustomary field in that sense.
So we haven't reconnected with Noah in a while, but Noah is a former guest on the show. An incredibly cool dude. You're 100% right. What a superstar, doing everything that he's doing, especially with Dwayne Wade calling the basketball. I
Yeah.
mean, you're absolutely right there. You talk about the Final Four. Unfortunately, Nick is a St. John's grad, so they didn't quite make the run in the tournament. But a couple years ago, you had the opportunity to be rooting for a team that went to the Frozen Four and 10 years ago lost the national championship game, won a natty a couple of years ago, the Quinnipiac Bobcats. So let's talk about you attending Quinnipiac, your decision to go there because they have an incredibly strong communications program there, a media program. The only time I'm going to be able to shout him out. So we're going to shout out one of my best friends in the whole world, Gene DeMayo. You were there with him at Quinnipiac. So talk about your decision ultimately to go there and pursue what you wanted to do since you were 5 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty wild in hindsight. I think a lot of people when they come out of high school or whatever and they want to pursue this and they look towards the collegiate route, you have the heavy hitter names that are going to come out. You have your Syracuses, your Ithacas, and whatever it may be for this industry, BU. But I knew what the first and foremost important thing for me was going to be was that I'd be able to get hands-on experience right away. covering preferably Division One athletics because I think, D1 is kind of the foundation for a lot of throwing you into the fire types of situations. And I thought that was really important for me. And it was no disrespect to any of the other schools. Syracuse is a renowned institution, the Eagles very much representing that in pretty much everything they do. But when I went up to Syracuse, I remember them saying, like, you're gonna have to really put the work in the first couple of years, not getting your opportunities, and then come junior year, that's when you'll get the chance. And for some people that works. For me, I felt this is a much more practical industry. Broadcasting, television, it's not an industry that you can learn a lot from just reading books and taking tests. Like you have to get out there, you have to be put in pressure situations right away because you learn by not succeeding in those situations and figuring out how you do succeed. So that was one of the really appealing things about Quinnipiac, and I ended up getting involved pretty early with a lot of the student media there, and that ultimately ended up running the television station there for 2 years. And when we took it over, the station had about 25 total people in it across three departments. And by the time that we left, it had more than 175, and it was a two-time national championship recipient. So we were very proud of the work that we did there. A lot of my colleagues went on to do some amazing things in the television industry. So I think when you just have a collaborative group effort of people who really want to succeed, you can do great things. And that was what that experience afforded me.
So let's talk about your first job out of college at MLB Network, winning an Emmy Award, as I mentioned. It seems like that building it knows how to bring in a lot of people from a lot of different places around the country. I have worked there. Nick has worked
Yeah.
there. A lot of people connected to us have worked there. A lot of people who you work with now at SNY, they've been in there before. They've worked there. So again, it just seems like a melting pot, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. A lot of great humans work there. So let's talk about your experience working in the swamps of Secaucus, New Jersey.
Yeah. Um, I started as an intern with MLB Advanced Media, which no longer exists, but that was BAM at the time, .com when I was like 19 or 20, and I was in New York City. I was commuting 2 hours both ways, 5, 6 days a week. It was a lot, but it was great, again, experience. And I'm big on networking, and I helped leverage that into an internship with MLB Network and eventually into a position with MLB Network. And it was so important for me because I learned the way that you can produce television to make it look big league. And I think that if you're trying to stand out in local, which my next gig was local, I was the sports director at ABC 7 Fox 22 in Bangor, Maine at 22 as the youngest sports director in the country. I think what helped me succeed there was leveraging some of the experience I had from MLB Network, where I was able to present local sports in a very big league way, making these high school athletes, these college athletes feel like they're on Sports Center every day. And I still talk frequently to a lot of the people I used to work with at MLB Network. I hated Pedro Martinez as a kid, but then getting a chance to be one of his
Old guy.
producers was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And
Good
he
Pedro
changed.
story too.
Oh, sure, he's a great character, right? And he changed how I watched baseball and how I consume baseball. Getting an opportunity to work with a lot of these individuals was really, really important to my personal growth, and it laid the foundation for me from an on-air standpoint, being behind the scenes, because I got a much greater understanding of how that sausage is made.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. Bangor, Maine, very young. You're getting an opportunity.
Yeah.
What are you doing in Bangor, Maine, other than working? And what was it like that process then when your contract's up and you make that move to Orlando? Joe, of course, loves Orlando and has a lot
Not
of ties.
not much else is going on besides when you're working in Bangor, Maine, with all due respect to the people of Bangor, Maine. I'm very happy I did it because I had never done small town living before in my life, and experiencing small town living really opened my mind up to a lot of the rest of the country and what's out there and the people. And there's a lot of great people, and I made a lot of inways with pro wrestling up in New England too. So that was really important for my career growth in that regard too. Eventually, something I would combine, but um, I think what really benefited me in Maine was that I was anchoring 3 times a night, 5 to 6 nights a week. So as I alluded to earlier, I believe in this industry, you are only as good as the amount of reps you get. And I don't believe that most broadcasters become good at what they do until they have a good 5 consistent years at least of being in the fire and doing it. So I think by having that many reps in my first 3 years, it helped polish me in a way that maybe some of my other colleagues weren't getting as many reps as I was. And I was covering talking about networking here, I was covering the AFC conference title game, AFC championship game in 2018 between the Patriots and the Jaguars. And I was in the buffet line, the media buffet line, and a guy behind me was from Orlando and he was there covering it. And we just got to talking, had a nice conversation, got his contact. I was like, yeah, cool, why not, right? A few months later, I'm down there on a trip and I see that guy on TV. I'm like, wait, that guy was behind me in the media line. So I watched their operation. I saw how it went. And then a job opened up there a few months after that. And I was like, wait, I have familiarity with this place. I know that guy. Let me reach out. And it put the wheels in motion. And there were some other steps as well to that. But I ended up getting an opportunity there to make the move to Central Florida and be big league covering a whole bunch of stuff in Orlando and Tampa. I covered Tom Brady for 6 years because I followed him from New England down to Tampa. So it ended up working out pretty well for me in that sense. But yeah, life is just truly a lot about right time, right place, and making most of the opportunities that are thrown in front of you. So I'm really big on that.
How many NXT shows did you go to living in Orlando?
I actually didn't go to too many. I went to a few. It was cool, the whole Full Sail experience when they were doing that. But being in Orlando, it was a pretty life-changing experience in terms of the pro wrestling regard because I was the only sports reporter or even news reporter for that matter who had any concept of the pro wrestling world in the area. And during COVID, especially the beginning of COVID, pro wrestling was like the only thing
Yeah.
running, and it was all based out of Orlando and Jacksonville. So I was like breaking all these COVID related stories regarding pro wrestling since it was like the only thing happening. I broke the Thunderdome happening. Ron DeSantis called me fake news for talking about an executive order that the state had put forward involving pro wrestling. Like, so it definitely helped my profile just because I tried to make
Yeah.
myself as well rounded as I could be. And again, right time, right place, awful time, but it ended up meddling
Well,
hand in
we've had
hand.
your other colleagues on from SNY who were doing local news at the time during COVID in sports, and they were asked to switch over to news. Did you have to do any news stories during that period there, and what would that transition be
I
like?
mean, I always did news stories every now and then, but in Florida it was a little different because a lot of things didn't really shut down in Florida
Right.
compared to the Northeast. Should they have? That's a whole nother story. But um, the the big thing that I focused on during my time in Orlando was human interest storytelling. So you can find a human interest story in any element of life, whether it's sports, news, entertainment, whatever it may be. There's human interest available. So if a person's a senior in high school, they're trying to get recruited to go to a D1 college, and their season is cut short because of COVID. Well, that's a story to tell because
Mhm.
now, from a very innate human level, you have a character that you can dive into. So there was no shortage of that. The difference in my operation compared to many others was that it was a 30-minute sports show 7 nights a week. How are you filling that when there's no sports going on from March to May?
Right.
That was a really big challenge that we had to encounter, but I think we all got better for it.
Absolutely. The early stage of this podcast, because Nick is the brainchild, right? He started it in March of 2020. I've known him for a long time. So very shortly after he was like, hey, listen, I need a co-host. You could be the
Yeah,
co-host. Those first 4 months, Nick, we were like, what are we going to talk about?
yeah,
What are we going to talk about? And eventually it grew because 5 or 6 months after that, we started having people connected to us on the show. As you kind of alluded to in your previous point, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That Orlando opening opened up a lot of doors for you because you were right in the middle of what was the COVID pro wrestling hotbed
It was
in Central
crazy.
Florida. It was from Full Sail, and then it went to the Performance Center. And I don't know if you've ever driven by the Performance Center. It's the middle of nowhere.
It's a
Really, like
warehouse.
it's a warehouse where it kind of feels like you're on the outskirts of the Boondocks area, from like between where the nice area of Orlando is and then where it gets not so nice. So
It comes Alabama.
yeah,
With all due respect to Alabama out there, any listeners in Alabama, it's just very different.
it is very, very different. But you were right in the middle of everything. And so when did you really originally start to fall in love with pro wrestling? Right. We know you're a baseball guy since you were very, very young. And how was it initially co-hosting wrestling podcasts with
Mhm.
Eric Bischoff and Matt Hardy? And Nick and I know you have a very, very close relationship with Matt Hardy working together all throughout
Yeah.
the years. So, how did your love for pro wrestling connect you with these certain people and get those opportunities off the ground?
Yeah, I always said baseball is my first love, but I did have a lot of love for pro wrestling growing up. October 5th, 1997, the first Hell in a Cell match, Bad Blood 97, when you've got the debut of Kane and Shawn Michaels and the Undertaker have their match, and I just remember being a 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old, turned 5, and being like, "Whoa, what is this?" I think I had a neighbor had it on or something like that. I was at their house. It's like, this is like a comic book come to life. This is crazy. So I was pretty enamored, and if you're a child of the Attitude Era like me and maybe you guys, it was a time to be alive that it's hard to really contextualize and put it properly in terms for anyone who wasn't around to experience it or didn't experience it in real time. And I had a few childhood favorites. I loved The Rock. I loved Kurt Angle. And I loved the Hardy Boys, but for whatever reason, I really loved Matt Hardy. I thought Matt Hardy, Jeff was kind of the sizzle. I thought Matt was like the grounded one, and that really appealed to me for some reason. So I would write about it over the years and covered it for a few websites. I helped launch a website that covered pro wrestling when I was in college, and had a pretty decent podcast going called Living the Gimmick for a while. Then, as I was leaving local news, I signed on into the podcasting and streaming side of things with pro wrestling, and Matt, from covering wrestling during COVID, I got a lot of new eyes on me, and Matt Hardy had followed me, and I had always conceptualized a podcast for him because I was at WrestleMania 33 in Orlando when they made their return, and I remember just seeing him walk down the aisle, and I was like, man, this guy, with how many times he's reinvented, he's brushed with death, he probably has some great stories to tell. So he had followed me like summer 2020, 2021, I can't remember, and we broke bread a little bit. But when I got the opportunity to make it more of a full-time thing at the time, I was like, all right, you know what? Let's pitch this. And I DM'd him one day and was like, hey man, I've got an idea I want to throw your way. I know you're super busy, you just had a new baby. Here's my number. Call me whenever. I don't care when it is. Just call me. And I just need 5 minutes of your time. So like 3 weeks went by, I didn't hear anything, and I was like, ah shit, that's the end of it. But I got a call one morning at like 2 in the morning. I go to bed at like 4, so it was fine. But I see Hardy Matt pull up on my phone caller ID. I'm like, all right, here we go. So he was up with the baby, and he's like, hey man, like good to chat. We got 5 minutes. What you got? And I essentially just pitched him on a podcast in 5 minutes, and we got dinner together one night, and it was just kind of instantly hit it off, and
It was
uh,
wonderful.
it was indeed wonderful, and it's crazy because I always thought I'll work and be business partners with this guy, but he's genuinely become one of my closest friends, and I never expected a guy that I grew up loving uh, to become one of my closest friends. Like he'll be in my wedding one day type of friend, and it's a testament to who he is as a person, and it's amazing. The other ones, I'm super grateful for who I've had a chance to work with. I told you Kurt Angle was one of my favorites. I got to host Kurt's podcast for a little bit. I hosted a podcast with his wife for a little bit. I got a chance to work with Eric for a few years, which was a really polarizing but great experience at the same time. Arn Anderson, I've had a chance to become really close with through working for his show. And then, now getting a chance to do some work for the Takedown on SI. It's fun. It's no longer an industry I really desire to work full time in, but I enjoy being able to dabble in. And I got to work on the indies for a while too. So it's a lot of fun.
So let's talk about being banned from Limitless Wrestling by Matt Hardy. Was it a work? Was it a shoot? Was it a work shoot?
Yeah, that was funny. So Limitless Wrestling, I think, and I'll be transparent, I've been involved with Limitless since pretty much year two of the organization. Limitless is one of the best independent promotions in the country. I did a lot of on-screen stuff for them, and still to this day, I do a lot of behind-the-scenes booking with the promotion and facilitating with talent and everything. And I think Limitless is one of the best storytelling indies in the country. So in New England, that's what I was alluding to earlier with some of the work I did in local. It was great synergy. It afforded me amazing opportunities I worked matches. I was a manager, and then I'm working matches, and then I ended up going down to the world famous Monster Factory in the Philly area and being a part of their documentary that's on Apple TV, which was incredible. So that angle we did with Matt was pretty funny. That was a fun little video. But yeah, it's just a world I never anticipated I'd get a chance to be a part of, but finagled my way into, and it scratched my performance itch for sure.
There you go. So I'm curious, do you remember the first time where you were out in public and you got recognized as, oh, it's Jon Alba, the wrestling guy? And how did that make you feel?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happened in New England for sure when I was doing the local indie stuff. But in terms of like from wrestling coverage, I'd say it started happening more after all the COVID stuff and I'm
Mhm.
going to cover events. I'd say it started to happen more there and going to events and people recognizing my work from there. But it'll happen randomly, like being in New York City, and I don't really care about the whole getting recognized thing. That's not something that is important to me. But yeah, every now and then it's nice to know someone's paying attention to your work, right? So if I'm out in New York City, naturally I'm going to think, oh, they saw this on SNY, right? But it really pops me whenever if I get stopped and it's like, oh, Matt Hardy's podcast, like Eric Bischoff's podcast. That always is funny to me because like, what are the odds in New York City that's what's going to be the calling card? So it is funny when it happens like that.
So let's talk about writing for the Takedown and SI page. I think in this weird way, what COVID did was create momentum for this mini wrestling boom here that you're seeing the last, I
Yeah,
would say, 2.5
yeah.
to 3 years. And I think the way that it's covered now, in particular, especially with these old traditional sites that just the ESPNs and the Sports Illustrateds of the world, like they never used to cover pro wrestling like this. And now it gets picked up by the mainstream sites just like that, right? Nick and I have been very fortunate where we've had the opportunity to interview a lot of great pro wrestling journalists. Like, I mean, Meltzer was on our show years ago, right? But talk about writing for, the Takedown, the SI page, and, just again, having your stuff, that published, circulating out there, people were reading your content, coming to you, for go-to content, appreciating your work.
Well, for me, it's more, we do a lot of news writing there, but what that outlet has afforded me an opportunity to do that I'm really grateful for is my true passion is long form human interest storytelling. So I get to write features again. And like you guys are both sports fans, you know that there's just something so tremendous about reading a great sports feature or a sports column, right? Like old school journalism, someone does an amazing 2,000 word piece on something. There's just something so traditional and wholesome about that. And I feel like pro wrestling has kind of been devoid of that. There hasn't been a lot of that in the space. So that's something that I can use in my background as a traditional sports journalist and bring that to the space. I did fun feature on Mackenzie Mitchell from TNA. I did one with Adam Copeland that I thought kind of painted him as the last storyteller of his generation in AEW. I thought that was fun. I just interviewed right before we hopped on here. I just spoke with Tony Khan for about 20 minutes for a piece I'm going to be working on. I'm dropping later this week as we record this a really emotional piece on Mike Santana from TNA, who he cried like 3 or 4 times during our interview talking about some of his experiences growing up around substance abuse and alcohol abuse and his own demons with that. So being able to channel that side of me is really creatively fulfilling. And sure, you want to make money, but when you are someone who enjoys telling stories, really enjoys the art. I love the art of great journalism. And I think that in today's society, today's media sphere of content creators, I use that term lightly, I think we've kind of lost sight of what made great journalism so resonant and fantastic. So that's what that outlet allows me to still do when I get an opportunity to.
So wrestling, of course, it's what you made your name in wrestling, and it kind of helped you, right? When you came to SNY, you were discovered, right? You didn't actively seek that out. Am I correct in that assumption?
It's again back to the whole right place, right time sort of thing. So I told you at the beginning of this, my dream was always to be like talking about baseball on TV,
Yep.
regional sports network, New York City. And when my local career ended after Orlando and I pivoted to podcasting and streaming, I kind of thought that that was it for me, like in TV. I just thought that was the end of my TV career. You know, the medium is changing so much, and I figured that would be the end for me. I got laid off from my podcasting gig. So it's full-time freelancing. I got laid off recently back in December, so back to full-time freelancing. It's a brutal industry, right? Um, but one day I noticed in like the summer of 2023 that the head of talent for SNY followed me on Twitter. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I clicked on his profile and we DM'd. I was like, okay, networking opportunity, right? So I DM'd him, hey, thanks for the follow. You know, I love SNY, blah, blah, blah. And he tells me, he's like, have you ever done TV work before? And I'm like, it's like the scene in Anchorman when Ron Burgundy pulls out the flute. He's like, oh, I could never, you know. It's like I was like, have I worked in TV before? Here's my reel. And
Yeah, you're ready to go.
because he didn't know me from TV or sports television, he happened to be a fan of one of my podcasts about pro
Oh,
wrestling.
There you go.
So he had no idea that I even had the TV background or that I hosted a show in Orlando that was exactly like the show that is on SNY on a sports night, a half-hour sports show 7 nights a week. So he's like, would you be interested in coming in and doing some maybe panelist stuff? I was like, sure. I don't care. Put me on whatever. I'll talk about rugby. I don't care. Like give me you take advantage of the opportunity. So I mean, he didn't even have me audition. He's like, I know you can do this. Like, I feel confident in your skill set. So, but the problem for me, guys, was that even if you've listened to my podcast, you know this too. I'm not a hot take guy. I really don't like doing hot takes. I love facilitating conversation, hosting. And if I'm going to be giving a take, I really want it to be like analytical, based in information. I don't want to be like, I think the Yankees are bad because of this. That's just not who I am. So that I really had to adjust a lot in the panelist role at first with SNY because it was a lot of talking head stuff. You know, I'm going against John Jastrzemski, who's one of the best talking heads in all of New York City sports, right? He's amazing. That was really a big adjustment. And I slipped in and I told him, I was like, hey, if there are ever opportunities for me to host, I'd love to show you what I can do because I feel like that is my true strength. And I begged and begged and begged and not desperately, but like I needled and needled for 4 or 5 months. And I finally got the opportunity on a whim to fill in for someone. And after that, I slowly earned their trust. And now I'm firmly in the rotation of fill-in hosts. I'm a panelist. After this, I'm going to be heading into the studio to do stuff. So I'm the only person on staff who goes back and forth between host and panelist. And I think that if you can show that you're versatile and multifaceted and anything in media, that you can wear a variety of different hats, that's really important. And I think it's also important to show a different side of analysis. A lot of our guys are hot take guys and they're really good at what they do. I prefer to come at it from more of an analytical standpoint. And maybe the New York City radio stations don't love that. Maybe some fans don't love that. But Iron Eagle taught me from a very young age, pre-production is production. The amount of work you put in ahead of time on something will be reflected in the quality of the work you put out. So if I'm not doing my preparation, whether I'm hosting, whether I'm an analyst, I'm not doing the job well. And that's my approach to anything I do with them.
So you are very well prepared. You're always giving those big numbers or stats and
Trying
stuff.
to.
So 10:30 p.m. or 11, that's when the show is going live. What time are you getting to the studio to start prepping? Obviously, you have to watch the game, so maybe it's a big crunch post game. So talk to us about the
Yeah.
daily routine when you're at SNY.
Well, it depends on what I'm doing. You
Yeah.
know, if I'm hosting, I'm there a lot earlier because you're taping promos, you're getting all ingrained in all that. But if I'm a panelist, then I like to try to get there by like the third or fourth inning. Even though I'm watching the game prior to that, that's when it usually when I go in, I'll do my makeup early and then I'm from there just kind of embedded in the game itself, and I'm looking for trends, I'm looking for big moments, I'm monitoring social media to see if anybody else picks up things. There are a lot of smart people on social media who pick up on trends and stuff that you might miss, so I'm big on trying to keep my eye on that stuff. And I do love advanced analytics, especially with baseball. I'm never going to be someone who's just going to be like, my argument is based on this guy having a good WRC plus. What I'm going to say is, hey, Aaron Judge is on a historic tear right now. He's got a WRC plus of 232. What does that mean? That means he's 132% better than the average major league player at creating runs. Now, the way you describe that versus just saying the stat is very different, right? If you're just saying the stat, there's no context to it. But if you're putting into perspective of what that means and contextually, where does it fit in within the story of baseball? That's how I approach injecting a lot of this stuff. But at my core, like I just love the game. So if I get a chance to talk about baseball, I love talking about other sports too, but baseball, that's the one for me that I'm going to put the most time into for sure.
Yeah, so we put out that we're gonna have you on. We got a fan question here for you.
Oh no.
From Keith Arizari, and
Oh goodness.
Keith wants to know, why is he the best, and why do you like working with him the most over everybody else?
Yeah. Yeah, that's whew.
Sounds like Keith, right?
It
That's a
sounds like
difficult question to
it's
answer.
impressively on brand for Keith is what I'll say.
And is Keith the most in shape?
Keith is definitely
Analyst.
the most in shape. JJ gives him a run. JJ runs like
Oh.
5 miles a day, so I gotta go in that. The only place I'm running is to the Wegmans. It's about 200 feet down from my apartment. But um, I'll tell you, I first met Keith when I was a college student, and Keith hosted a panel with Michael Sam at our school, if you remember that name.
Yeah.
He hosted a panel with him, and we kept in touch over the years. And I was already at SNY when he started doing some work with us, and it was so cool the first night that we were on air together. It just was one of those full circle moments in your career. And Keith still looks exactly the same from when I met him. He doesn't age; it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But he is a good dude. And listen, there are a lot of good people in TV. There are also a lot of not great people in TV.
Right.
Keith is one of the real good ones. So I love Keith. He is one of my favorite people to work with. He is a character, that is for
Out to
sure.
Keith, great guest of ours. We had
Yes.
a guest speak for his class last week on podcasting.
Nice,
Awesome
very
guy.
nice.
So now I'm going to ask you a tough question. And I don't want you to skate out of this one. I want you to be brutally honest.
Yes.
Power rank the Johns at SNY.
There are so many Johns at SNY. Do you understand this? Like, this is something we talk about frequently, how many Johns there are at SNY. I will say, to my knowledge, off the top of my head, I think I'm the only JON. I think.
Um,
Which I feel by nature makes me number one,
Okay.
simply because it's quicker to write down on a piece of paper. No, John Jastrzemski, JJ, is one of the most dynamic personalities I've ever done anything on air with. He is amazing, and he is so good at being on the pulse of what people are thinking. It's unlike anybody I've ever worked with. My favorite thing about working at SNY is getting to ping the brains of all these fantastic sports writers who have been in the game for so long. And John Harper is one of those. John Harper is so knowledgeable and has so much experience and loves Bruce Springsteen as much as I do. So there's a lot for us to talk about in that regard. He is a wealth of knowledge. Um, who else am I missing? There's so many.
That's the three we
That's the
know.
three. Okay, you ranked. So I
Yeah.
think that in fairness, I'm going to go JJ, Harp, and then myself.
You know what? You started that like you were going to turn heel, and we still have babyface Alba. Are you ever going
Yeah.
to turn heel?
Yeah. I mean, I got to watch myself because I'm still low in the pecking order. So I have to.
I think you could have easily put J last because he goes by JJ. So
That's fair. That's fair. He's cheating the system.
and
And it's
you
funny
go
because
Harper first for respect fact.
I could go JJ. My middle name is Joseph. If I wanted to go JJ, I could, and we could really create
That sounds like
problems.
a segment that needs to be
Yeah,
played
Well,
out.
well, we have a John Joseph and we have a Joseph John.
Joseph John.
But I
Okay.
spell
John,
my middle name with the H.
have
Yeah.
you hosted Sports Night with Harper and JJ as the people together?
Oh man, I don't know if we have, but I
Uh,
think we need to
I
blow
think
up
that's gotta
the
happen.
internet with that, right? Like, no, honestly, I always say this: the one guy on SNY who shares my brain when it comes to baseball. We think, and we have like very similar music taste too. I've gone to concerts with him. Um, Anthony McCarron.
Oh, he's the
Anthony
best.
McCarron and I think about baseball the same exact way. It's alarming how similar we are and how we look at it. And he values that. He and I will get off on a tangent about the Hall of Fame for 2 hours and forget what we're doing. I love Anthony. I love all the people I work with at SNY, and that's very genuine. And it's not something that you come by often in TV. I've never have once felt like I am at a workplace when I'm at SMY because I really enjoy collaborating with all the individuals I'm on there with, and it's a really great team.
Sure. And obviously, when you're on TV, you have to look prim and proper. Now, my buddy here, Joe, he gets a haircut and beard shave every single week. So I'm curious, how often are you, John, going to get your hair cut? Because you probably have the best hair at SNY. I mean, no respect to Michelle Margot or Nikki Lotterulo, but you got some good
I appreciate
slicking
that.
going right
I
there.
appreciate that. They all have great hair too. Nikki and Michelle and Chelsea. Um, it's funny. I'm very grateful to have this right here beside me, but the proudest award that I have to my name in 2018, I received a regional Harry Award, which is given out to the best hair in television, and I won for the best sports anchor hair in the New England region. And I was by an organization called Get Good Head, and they gave me a little prize package of hairspray and shampoo and conditioner. It's one of the most it's one of the most meaningful things that's ever happened to me in my entire life, quite frankly. No,
Accomplishment.
I probably don't get my haircut as often as I should. I really should, but sometimes I like to like to let the coif build a little bit, you know. It's all about coif and depth. I think those are the very important things. The facial hair thing was not something that I was ever allowed to have when I was in local. Local was very, you cannot have facial hair.
Mhm.
So when SMY was like, yeah, have facial hair, I was like, let's do it. So I actually will probably shave before I go on air tonight, but I like to vary it up based on
Makes
how
sense.
I'm feeling.
All right, fair enough. And you, of course, I think you get the memo because you want to pop off the screen. You have those great red suits, the burgundy suits. So who is the best dressed at SNY? Open up to all your
Of the
colleagues,
men,
men and female.
Well, I don't want to comment on the women. That's not my place
Okay,
to
fair
make that
enough.
comment. They all do a great job. Um, of the sports night crew. I mean, you're talking to them right now. Come on,
There he is.
like that's if that's something that I can use to identify. You got to
Mm,
stand out somehow. And like,
all right.
I'm never gonna dress in an obnoxious way. Like, I'm not about that at all. But when I was local, I was only allowed to wear gray or blue. I was not allowed to wear any other colors. So the very first thing I did the day my contract ended in local was buy a maroon suit. Like it was the very first thing I did. So I have maroon, I've got a red, I've got a few shades of gray, a charcoal. I want actually Matt Hardy's kid just destroyed my charcoal shoot suit, so I'm very upset about that. You know, I think that guy's got enough money that he could buy me another one if he really wanted to. But Big Money Matt is not just a gimmick; it's a real thing. So. Um, yeah, I'm always on the lookout for a nice suit. So if you have any recommendations of combos you'd like to see, throw them my way.
I think you should go yellow. I mean,
I hate yellow. I hate
it'd be
yellow.
really good on TV though.
I think
It would be
I've got
ugly suit, but it would look
I've
phenomenal.
got a tan suit. I've got a tan suit. Well, I'd look like I'm playing for the Savannah Bananas at that
Yeah.
point. I don't know if I'm playing banana ball on SNY. It's just not. No, yellow is like the one color I think I look atrocious in. Like
Not many people
not
could pull
good.
off yellow.
I don't know. I have no
Maybe
yellow
how about a pink
colors.
suit for Valentine's Day?
Pink, I could get behind a pink suit. I think I like wearing a pink shirt on air. I could get behind a pink suit.
Now, if you want a pink suit, you going white shirt, black shirt? What are you doing?
If I'm doing a pink suit, I'm doing a white shirt.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, you don't want to go inverse on light and dark colors. That's not good for TV. Like dark shirts are not good for TV. You can have a dark suit,
Yeah.
but you don't want to wear a dark shirt with a dark
And
suit.
nothing's worse than people when people are black on black. It's like,
Right,
see.
exactly. And for TV purposes, it really doesn't look good in my opinion because like
Um,
you're almost blending in with yourself and the lights. Occasionally, I'll wear like I've got on my back here, I've got like a gray blazer, and
mhm.
I've got a really nice like light gray shirt from Theory that it meshes very well without looking too dark. Occasionally, I'll do that, but I you will never see me wear a dark shirt with a light
Yeah.
suit color.
I just want to
Come on.
give a shout out to Eamon McEnany because he always wears a tie, and I think the host should always wear a tie, and you always wear a tie when you host as well.
When I host, yes, yes. When I host, I always wear a tie. If I'm a panelist, it's dependent on who my co-panelist
Right.
is. If my co-panelist is wearing a tie, I will wear a tie.
Do you
If they're
guys
not,
talk over beforehand, or you like you see that person, you follow suit?
I usually know who's gonna and
Right.
who's not gonna.
John
So
Harper's gonna wear a tie, McCarron's gonna wear a tie, JJ's no tie.
JJ's no tie. So if I'm on with JJ or if I'm with Keith, it's not gonna be a tie.
Yeah.
If I'm on with Harper, he can go either way. He's fine going either way with it. So we'll game time decision that. And if I'm on with McCarron, it is always
Okay.
a tie.
Well, Presti
So
always with a tie as
D'Lo
well.
is always a tie as well. Correct. Yes.
Mhm. So that's it, Joe. The inner workings there. We learn
Yes.
about
Yes.
how do you
Amazing.
determine the tie.
Yes.
Yes.
There is a science to it. So
Yeah, I can't be a tie person. I have a big neck. It's too constricting.
it's funny. I was always like, you got to wear a tie. You got to wear a tie. And then we've just kind of laxed up on that over the years, and I like
Yeah,
that.
it
It's
used to
definitely
be
more
very
comfortable.
formal. Now a lot
Yeah.
of people these days
Well,
just
Nick, you mentioned Eamon. Like Eamon is your classic sportscaster,
Yep.
right? Like he's from the era of your classic Sports Center anchor, and so he dresses and his appearance is very much
Yep.
classic sportscaster, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's good to have a variety, and Eamon, what Eamon does really well, I think highlights are like the crux of sports television, and I think you have to do one of two things right with a highlight. You need to have context or you have to have color. And I think Eamon's very good with doing that. You have to take viewers beyond what they're seeing on the screen. So he comes from the golden age of Sports Center, right? Like where the Stuart Scotts
Yeah.
and the John Andersons, like they were fantastic at highlights. So he's very much brought up through that school, and
Yeah.
I think it shows whenever he
So
hosts.
we asked Nikki about this, and she said the first time she heard it, she was very startled. But the first time you work on Eamon and he drops the only on SNY, what's going through your head?
I had to understand what the bit was at first, and then like I got it, and now it's funny you don't see it on screen because it's always during a tease, but whenever he does it, all the production crew that's like in the room like does like they conduct it with him like they're like, oh man, S and Y. Um, JJ will do it with him because usually Monday nights it's Eamon, JJ, and I, which I believe will be as we record this tonight. So that
So
that
that's other question. You're working Mondays. How you watching Raw and the Yankees and the Mets and the Knicks and the Rangers all at once?
So my schedule changes every single week. I don't have any consistency
Yeah,
whatsoever. So some nights it's actually very seldom I'm on a Monday. So it's I ended up just being on
works
this
out for you.
particular one. But I'm on a lot of weekends. I'm on a lot of Saturday nights. I'm on a lot of Friday nights. Prime
Mm.
time, baby, right? But
Now,
you
are you going to
can't
be at
watch.
WrestleMania? Are you going to be working
This year I will
SNY?
not be at this year I will not be at
So you're
WrestleMania.
going to be are you
I've
going to be working SNY during WrestleMania? That'd be tough for you.
This year I'm not at SNY. I'm actually in the music studio on Saturday, and then I'm going to be with my family on Sunday.
Okay, fair.
But uh, I have covered 29, I've covered 5 WrestleManias, I think. This year Vegas was just too much to get out to. It just, and we already have 2 people on our team that's going out there. But I very seldom actually get to watch pro wrestling live. I usually have to catch up on a lot of it.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm working at SMY, my priority is you got to watch the Knicks game, you
Yep.
got to watch the Mets game, you got to watch the Yankee game. So that's where my attention is, and I
It's
try
New
to
York
dedicate
sports
as much
here.
as I can.
Get your New York
What's that?
sports, yeah.
It's your New York sports here.
Right, exactly. So
Okay.
that's what, and you have to come off as knowledgeable when you're talking about this stuff. If you don't come off knowledgeable, who's going to care about what you have to say? They barely care as is what I have to say. So I got to convince them somehow.
Very true. Very, very true. Thankfully, you're a renaissance man. You're knowledgeable in a lot of different
Yeah.
areas coming to New York sports,
I know
pro
just
wrestling,
enough, Joe.
just
Just enough.
enough.
That's the
And
only
now
thing.
and now you have a potential career breakthrough when it comes to your hair, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of different things here. You figured out how to marry a couple of these
Head and
things.
Shoulders
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah.
What's interesting about you, right, is again, you started from a young age, you wanted to do something, right? And then you deviate a little bit, and you got to take a bunch of your interests. Some of them you can combine, others now, especially with
Yeah.
the white thing, right? It's like you can infuse a little bit of your personality and your backgrounds, but long term for you, right? Is there something that is on the Jon Alba checklist that hasn't been crossed off yet? That's something that you've always wanted to do. That's something that's forward.
Sure.
What is that, and can you share it with us?
My priorities have changed a lot over the years, especially when you're just grinding so hard in those first few years. Like I said, I mean, I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Like it's just you're killing yourself with how much you're working. I mean, literally, like your body's breaking down.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always like get to the RSN, get to the RSN, get to the RSN. I'm not even a full-time employee of SNY, I'm just a guy who shows up every now and then. But when I went on SNY for the first time, it was every bit of like career fulfillment that I needed where I hit it and I was like, okay, I did what I set out to do. I made it. If this all ended tomorrow, I can say I made it to where I want to be. What would you like to be full time? Sure. Would you like to be able to host sports night every night? Sure. But I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I have had. And now my priorities are much more focused on personal fulfillment than it is professional fulfillment, especially as someone who's been laid off twice in the last 3 years. I know that businesses and companies, and I'm not saying this about SNY. SNY has been fantastically loyal to me and so great, and I love it. But just in a general sense, when you're working for someone else, they're only going to be as loyal to you as their checkbook allows them to be, right? So if they encounter issues or for whatever reason, you can be SOL. So now I focus a lot of my goals on my personal fulfillment, going to the concert, going to the game and seeing it in person, uh, taking our Hardy podcast on the road and doing live events across the country. Like those are the things that I enjoy. Um, having good work-life balance, dedicating time to my girlfriend, like that stuff is what's important to me. I'm the dog dad of a 7-pound Morky Poo. Like I have to put the time into that, right? So I take every opportunity that I get, and I'm grateful for it. But personal fulfillment is a lot more important to me than professional fulfillment at this point. And also, one thing I should mention, I love mentoring and I love coaching the next generation of people. That's something that's really important to me. So if I can pass it forward, just like how Ian did to me, if I can pass that forward to other people, I always jump at that opportunity.
We have teacher too. Like I said, a
Yeah.
true renaissance man.
I,
But you know, I think there might be other potential opportunities for you down the line. Especially, we'll go back to the pro wrestling thing here for a second. Nick and I were very fortunate that Adnan Virk is a very close friend of ours, and
nice.
a little closer with Nick than he is with me. But over through the years, I've had the
Nice.
opportunity to see him, and he's been the play-by-play broadcaster for Monday Night Raw, and we have had other people on with us in the past, including like Tom Hannafin, right? So has the opportunity, right? Being on covering pro wrestling on the independent level, the independent circuit, especially, but getting insight, for the bigger stars, with the opportunity to join a major organization, to have the opportunity to maybe do some interview work and maybe do some play-by-play at the table. Would that excite you in any way? And like, let's say, like Peter Rosenberg, what he does with Evolve, with the new WWE partnership, you think would you be like better or worse than him, right? Do you think you could figure out a way to get
Definitely
yourself
better.
company?
Jeez.
And because I think you're an excellent talker, and I think there's a certain,
You gotta be a storyteller to do play-by-play.
but there's
Human
also
interest
there's a
stories.
certain discipline to it, right? Your obligation is to call what's in front of you in a way that enhances the story that's in front of you.
Mhm.
And I think you do an excellent job with that. And that shows considering how fortunate you've been. So would opportunities like that be of interest to you one day, John?
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Joe. Thank you. And Tom Hannafin's a good dude. I've known Tom for a hot second. So I mean, look, I'll be very honest with you guys, and a very transparent answer here. I have had interviews and auditioned with WWE probably about 3 times over the years. My first was when I was 22 or 23.
Wow.
I was in way over my head. I can assure you of that. I was so not even remotely ready. And then it was looking like there might have been an opportunity with AEW when they first launched, and that didn't come to be. It's never really been something, especially in recent years, that I've really aspired for per se. As I've become so ingrained in the wrestling world and met so many of these individuals involved with it, you do get exposed to a lot of things that just wouldn't really fly in most normal sectors of life. I love the art of wrestling. If you asked me to put a match together right now, I feel confident that I could. But for me, like, especially coming from the traditional sports television world, right? Like, there are a lot of people that live in their own bubbles. And the one thing about the pro wrestling industry that a lot of people don't realize is that it's an industry that's built on a lie when you think about it, right? Like what you're watching is not real. But it's presented as real. And the action is very real in the sense that it hurts and it is extremely incredibly impressive of what these individuals are capable of doing. But the world in which the content exists is created. It's a fabricated world, correct? So a lot of the individuals who work in pro wrestling or have worked in pro wrestling for their entire careers somewhat live in that bubble. And I'm grateful for a lot of the opportunities I've had. Would it have been really cool at one point in my life to be a pre-show host or a post-show host or something like that for a WWE or an AEW or whatever, or a backstage reporter? I'll tell you something I pitched because I was recruited to pitch something. They an organization, a major organization, I won't say which one, came to me and uh, asked me to make a pitch for a position, and I said, you know what would be really cool for pro wrestling? is having a sideline reporter in pro wrestling, in the match. Like, hey, throw to the sideline reporter. Hey, I was talking to Roman Reigns earlier today, and he told me he's going to focus on Seth Rollins' knee because, yeah, like, I think that would be a cool way to legitimize sports presentation. And WWE's become a little more open-minded to sports presentation over the last few years since Nick Khan came in and they brought Lee Fitting in and they kind of changed all that. But I'm not really sure if that's something that appeals to me at this juncture in my career. Would I be willing to listen to any opportunity that comes my way, regardless of the organization or sport or whatever? Sure. I think you're not doing yourself a service, a proper service, if you don't listen when a network or a company approaches you about an idea or an opportunity. But it's not something that I'm actively seeking to do, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. So we mentioned it,
Yeah.
WrestleMania. It's coming up this weekend. What celebrity or athlete are you hoping makes a cameo at WrestleMania?
What celebrity do I hope will make a cameo at
Yeah.
WrestleMania?
You have to assume that Tom Brady is going to be there, right? He's a
I would
Raiders
think
owner.
Brady. I mean, he teased being there earlier this week. I saw. It's possible Tom Brady could show up. I mean, that would be a pretty big get for WWE if you could get Tom Brady on camera
Yeah.
for WrestleMania. I feel like he's probably the most likely of any of them. I don't know. I mean, are there any other like Vegas residencies going on right now that
I was
someone's
thinking you
synonymous?
might get a Mayweather appearance again.
Uh,
That might be 50-50,
yeah.
but it has to play into the
Mhm.
Vegas theme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Why don't they get the
Maybe they get
Sacramento
Penn and Teller to
Athletics?
show up since they're
Penn
like the
Teller?
longest running Vegas act ever. You get them. Maybe they could make a really bad storyline disappear before our eyes. Who's to say?
Yeah. I think they gotta go in the entertainment sphere, get like Andy Cohen on or somebody from
Yeah, that'd be
Bravo.
fun. That'd be fun.
They bet Jimmy Fallon made a few appearances. I'm sure we'll see him at SummerSlam this year.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
worst, the worst
that'd be
thing
fun.
was when they had Michael Che in the Battle Royal in
Mm.
MetLife. Oh, that was just like
I forgot that was a thing. Thanks for
What was
reminding
the
me.
Andre the
thing?
Giant Memorial Battle Royal. But it came down to them and Braun Strowman, right? Him, Colin
I
Jones.
was there. I was
Strowman.
there.
Buddy, I was there too, and I've got no recollection of that whatsoever. So I'm glad that you did.
That
Now
show
that
was
you say it, I
really, really
remember it.
long.
That was
Now
like they built that up for weeks. That
they
thing.
did.
Oh.
They did. They did.
Which match do you think is going to deliver the most?
Which match do I think is going to deliver the most? What's your barometer for delivering?
The entertainment value.
Hmm. Listen, I've said that even for months before even the turn happened. I said if they're gonna do Cody and Cena, don't be surprised if the match is laid out in a way that's very similar to Rock Hogan from WrestleMania 18,
Mm,
because Cody has on many occasions cited Rock Hogan as like the biggest influence for his career from a storytelling
yeah.
standpoint. So don't be surprised if the match is structured in a very similar way to that. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a callback to that match in a pretty direct, blatant way.
Yeah.
So that could certainly happen.
I think
I
Cena's gonna get a lot of cheers too at
Yeah,
WrestleMania.
and that look what happened with Rock Hogan,
Yeah.
right? Like Hogan got cheered a lot in that match. So, do they turn on Cody? We'll find out. I think the triple threat between the women, Io Sky, Bianca Belair, and Rhea Ripley is probably gonna deliver in a big way. I think the three of them
I think
are
that's gonna be the biggest letdown match.
really.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Not a fan
disagree
of Rhea
anymore.
Ripley.
I
Oh,
just think, well, Maria's got a broken nose now, right? I guess we'll see. But I
yeah,
just think I
whatever.
don't like the way they built the storyline up. I mean,
I don't disagree with you. I don't
no,
love the story that's been built, but that means nothing to when the actual match happens.
no.
I
I think
think
the other women's match, another bad storyline, is going to be really good though. Charlotte and Tiffany
I
Stratton.
hope so. I hope it is. I there's no reason that it should be bad. It should deliver, but I think Io Sky is one of the most underrated wrestlers in the
Right.
world. I think Bianca
The way
Belair
they're
is
built, they're writing it. I mean, Io should win, but I don't think she's going to.
she could.
But I think
Y- y-
I think if Rhea Ripley is walking out of WrestleMania, I think they botched this as she's walking out as champion with the way they built the whole story. I think, and I think Joe's would agree with me, that they made it a triple threat so that Bianca could pin Io, so then they could do Rhea versus Bianca at SummerSlam.
And that's possible. They
Yeah.
certainly could do that. I think it was probably a byproduct of wanting to get Io Sky on the show,
Yep.
and they determined that this was going to be the avenue to do that with. I off the top of my, I don't have the card memorized off
How
the top
about
of my head.
Naomi and Jade? Is that going to deliver a very
Uh,
rare non-title
yeah,
match for
yeah.
women at WrestleMania?
Yeah, and I'm glad they're having that opportunity,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
going to
put a
be
lot of equity into telling that story, and that's good. Representation is
yeah.
a very important thing, and representation goes beyond just having two black women wrestle on a card. It's, do they have a story that's been
They have
worthwhile,
one
and
of
have
the
they
longest
invested?
going stories of
Yeah,
any of the matches on the card.
definitely so, definitely so.
Yeah.
So,
And
um, I,
is Dirty Dom walking out as champ? I think so. He's going to pin Finn Balor.
I think there's a good chance that that could happen for sure. I think that that is a route that they could end up going and trying to walk away with some of the quote unquote heat on that. You know, I think Gunther is one of the greatest professional wrestlers on the planet and like
Definitely.
one of the best of his generation. And he is tasked with an enormous uh, undertaking here of going and making Jey Uso a big time act, right? So
Yeah.
they have to go out there and they have to crush it. And I'm hoping that they do. I think that that match will probably open WrestleMania. So we'll
Yeah.
see if
Jey
they.
Uso starts it off with the entrance. It makes
Yeah,
sense.
so I wouldn't
Main
be
event, Jey
surprised.
Uso starting the show, as always.
Yeah,
As
and look,
always.
but you ask a lot of wrestlers.
If you're not
Matt
closing, you
Hardy and
want
I
to
talked
open it.
about this on a recent episode of the podcast when he opened Mania with Rey Mysterio in 2003. Like a lot of wrestlers
About
like the
time.
opportunity to open the show,
Yep.
because you can set the pace for the show, and
Yeah.
if you go out there and you have a killer match, everyone else has got to follow you after that.
And Joe,
Right.
you know what? You know what match is going to be phenomenal? AJ Styles versus Logan Paul. It's going to deliver.
Yeah,
They
I hope
always
so.
do.
I
Match,
mean, look,
the match that I think is going to deliver is Drew McIntyre and Damian
Ooh,
Priest.
I don't know about that.
And I think the reason being is that both those guys are in the same boat. With McIntyre, you saw a little bit of a story develop that they didn't follow through on. With Damian Priest, you've seen stories that have not really been followed through on. I
sure.
think they're both in the same spot. In terms of how I've seen Damian Priest improve in a 2-year period, it's very hard to go back and think to somebody who really improved so drastically in a 2-year period. And when it comes to Drew, he's just been very reliable. He actually stole the "You Know I'm Right" line in a promo.
You want to tell him how he got that from
Okay,
you, Joe?
okay. So quickly, because John, we know you kind of have to start moving, and
Oh no, you're fine. You're
know,
fine. I'm
you're
pulling
good
up the
now.
WrestleMania card in front of me just so I have
Okay.
it. I'm not missing anything
Okay.
here.
So to make a long story short, I went to Long Island for Saturday night's main event with my friend Joe back in December. We
Okay.
ended up sitting on the floor, got the seats and everything. We were right there, right behind the table. It is my assumption that we never made like eye contact or anything, but obviously Drew looking in our direction had to have seen the shirt. How do I know this? The next Raw, the one that was immediately after, cuts a promo with Rollins, and he specifically pauses before he delivers the line, "You know I'm right." And the reason why I think this is my conspiracy again, that somebody in this company knows of the podcast is when Cena came back and he delivered a promo. Was it his first promo or a second promo? Nick? I don't
That was
remember.
the first promo
It
in
was the first promo. He
Belgium.
came back. He very specifically says, again, after a pause, he says, "You know I'm right." So
Never know.
2 instances in a few months span, but it's not just like it's with Drew McIntyre and it's with John Cena.
So if I
Two
text
of
Drew
their
McIntyre
biggest.
right now, if I text Drew McIntyre right now, and if I ask him, did you take the "You know I'm right" line
You're
from a
gonna say
random
no.
fan sitting
He's gonna
ringside?
say no, but I think it's a
Could be the
yes.
writer though, Joe, right? That's your theory.
Could be. Someone backstage could have seen it on screen.
Well,
Said,
I will
hey,
say
this is
this,
Sure,
Joe.
I'm
You were
pretty
on
sure there's
camera the whole damn show. And they were What didn't they did a table spot in front of you or something?
They did the table spot in front of us. They came out very relatively early in the match. It was Drew and Sammy. If you look at some promotional pictures from the event, if you see like the back body drop or something, you very clearly see the friend Joe that I was with. You very clearly see us in the shot in the picture, and you can very clearly see the writing
Okay.
Huge
that
shirt.
what I have on my hat. It's on a shirt. I don't think he's going to admit it,
I
but
don't think he saw it.
I
I
disagree.
think somebody could have seen it who works there because
It's
again, you were on
possible.
all the camera shots. But if he's so in the moment, I don't know. But it is a good
Possible.
line. So
It's a great
Drew's
one.
got a pretty good memory, I'll tell you. The first time that I ever like spoke to Drew, I had mentioned to him that I went to some random Raw taping in like Hartford, Connecticut, in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 2012, and it was like the one day during his first run that he worked babyface, and he never worked babyface again.
ah,
And I mentioned it to him, and he was like, "Wait a minute, you were at that night in Bridgeport?" And like over the years, we ping each other. I'm like, "Congrats, man! You won the world title at WrestleMania, but it's no Bridgeport, you know." And like,
ah,
so he's a smart. He has good recall, and
all
all
right.
right, we'll try to get to the
You
bottom of
never
this and
know.
see.
I mean, it
Yeah,
could be, but like
Getting
Joe,
back to
but
you,
Joe, just like with John here, you never know who's watching.
it's
So
true.
you
It's
never
true.
know who's watching our podcasts. We found that out last week for sure. So you never know what network executive or wrestler is going to be
Sure.
watching. So it could work out. John, last wrestling question here. Give me a match you're not looking forward to, and you think is going to be like, whatever. It's just there. Wrestling.
Let's see. I got the card in front of me, so I just gotta make sure.
And do you think Mysterio is going to unmask El Grande Americano?
They could. That'd be fun. That should be a good match. I wish. I don't know if it has the equity of being on this card, but I mean, look, I look at all the matches on this show, and there's nothing on here that I'm like, man, this is gonna be a stinker or anything like that. And that has happened in years
Yeah,
past. I don't love this WrestleMania card. I don't think
yeah,
it's a fantastic card. Last year, I thought was a much stronger card overall. Um,
definitely.
I
I just hope that LA Knight and Jacob Fatu is not, one-sided.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting that match to light the world on fire or anything like that, but it's an important match in terms of presumably putting that title
Yeah,
on LA Knight and seeing what happens there. We'll
yeah.
find out what happens with the Randy Orton stuff and where they're going with that.
And maybe this works out on Friday, but for about 5 months, they're building to a fatal five-way tag team ladder match on SmackDown. And
Yeah.
now it appears we're not getting it. Maybe Friday, and I think Miz and Carmelo Hayes are going to get in the mix there as well. So
yeah,
it could
that
still
was
happen.
my
Hold
one
out.
biggest gripe with the card is that I think the SmackDown tag division has been built really, really well because I think SmackDown has struggled maybe a little bit with the 3 hours.
I
Raw
would say
got
so.
used to it for a long time, and I think the SmackDown tag division is an incredibly strong selling point to the show right now. I think the Street Profits are doing the best work of their career considering they're in this transition phase. And again, what Nick said is even if it was a ladder match, like you had the workings that they were going to build to something and reward those guys, and they kind of put the Raw tag titles on the show instead. So, for me personally, I think it would have been a really good selling point to have maybe a tag match, like a Raw SmackDown tag match, and then the winners have their titles defended on the show, right? You could have did
Yeah,
something like that.
sure.
So,
We'll
I
see.
mean, again, like I agree with you in the sense like last year's Mania and even the one before WrestleMania 39 in Los Angeles kind of seems like overall the car was maybe a little bit better, you know, prepared. But I think it'll be a good show regardless.
Yeah,
From
I'm not
over.
big on the whole multi-man stuff. I think there's a lot of multi-man things on this card, and that
Right.
gives me bad flashbacks to WrestleMania 2000, which I regard as one of the worst WrestleManias of all time. And
Underrated main event though, for sure.
okay, we'll agree to disagree on that one. A McMahon in every corner. You like that main event? I don't know.
It was appropriate for the
Good
time.
story.
Well, the story was all about the McMahons. That was the problem. But
Never had a heel reign. I mean, at the time I hated it, but then
yeah,
Backlash 2000 did the best buy rate of any
yeah,
Attitude Era B pay-per-view. So
yeah.
from a business
Oh, I'm
standpoint,
not saying it wasn't
it worked.
successful. I'm not saying it
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
successful. But yeah, I don't know. Just a lot of multi-man matches on this card, and that loses a little bit of appeal to me. Like especially since I felt the strongest matches on last year's card were the earned equitable singles matches. Sammy and Gunther last year, like stuff like that, and obviously Cody and Roman, but Io and Bailey, like that.
Yeah.
Just to me, that was a little more
That's
focused,
not
I guess.
surprised they went with the triple threat in the women's title match because you had the
Yeah.
big triple threat for night one. Joe, how do you think AEW Collision is going to do ratings wise going up against WrestleMania night one?
I tell you, I think the show has gotten a lot better the last couple of weeks. It's got some momentum to it. I like this time of the year for AW. I like uh the whole Owen Hart thing leading into to All In. It kind of feels like this time of the year for them is really the time of the year that I think that has to be the strongest. And I do like some of the things going on with AEW, but Collision, it's like how it is last year. Just I don't love that Saturday night spot regardless for them, but no, it's not my decision. We need to have Tony on the show. We need to
Well, we're
discuss.
gonna we're gonna read John's article with Tony, which is probably
There
gonna
you
be
go.
out this week. So
There you go.
we'll get the insight there on that. John, last thing from us here. In your life or in your career, what would you say has been your I'm right moment? What I mean by that, it's a time or place where you want to pursue something. You ask somebody for advice. They said, John, I don't think you should do that. It's not going to work out. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And in the end, you will see why it is that I'm right
Mm.
about this. I can tell you, I told you so.
I'll give you a real one and a more fun one. The more fun one is that all season long, all off season long, I was telling people the Mets need to re-sign Pete Alonso, and he's going to have the best season of his
Yeah,
career, hitting behind Juan Soto. And all these Mets fans turned on Pete Alonso this offseason,
crazy
and
people.
it was mind-blowing to me. And needless to say, Pete Alonso is having the hottest start of his career right now. He's having the best at-bats of his career. So I was 100% right on that one. And I will victory lap that all season long, and I don't care because I think he's going to have a great season. He might have a slump, he might drop a little bit, but I think he's going to have a great season. In a more macro scale, um, I wrote a long piece about this, which you can find. I have a Substack page. You can find that called "Less Coffee, More Wine." And I had a previous boss who, when I'm on air, you guys have watched me on air. I'd like to think I'm pretty animated. I try to have some energy, right? Sports TV, you should have some energy. That's kind of important. And I had a boss that told me that I needed to be less coffee, more wine, which was essentially their way of saying I needed to be more boring.
Hmm.
I was too animated. I had too much energy. I needed to cool down a little bit. And it actually really led to some like deep mental health struggles for me because I was then forcing myself to not be my most authentic self on camera. And when I'm on camera, I truly feel like I am my most authentic self. So having to suppress that really sucked. It sucked a lot. And I always would try to needle it a little bit and try to get away with showing a little more personality, but it was pushed back on pretty heavily. And when I passed along my tape to the individual at SNY who helped me get in, I asked for feedback, and they're like, my only feedback here is I need to see more energy from you. And I'm like, well, if you wouldn't believe this, I was told to be more boring. So if you want more energy, if you, as my favorite band AC/DC would say, if you want blood, you got it. So that was really important to me to be able to bring that out. And now I watch my tape, I watch my reel, I watch my segments, I watch every single segment I do. I ask the ingest people at SNY must hate me because I'm probably the only person who asks for every single segment I do because I think the only way you continue to stay good at this or be better at it is to watch yourself. So I feel very happy with who I am on air. I feel like I'm at my best that I've ever been on air right now. So I'm right about that. That's how I look
Yeah,
at it.
I like it. You're talking
Yeah,
coffee as Joe's sipping his coffee.
there you go.
Unbelievable.
I don't drink coffee at all,
You
ironically. So
shouldn't. It's not good for
yeah,
you. I don't drink it
yeah,
either.
that's.
Yeah,
I'll ask Drew McIntyre about this. I'm right, and we'll see. We'll put this to
so
bed here
good.
because you
So
might
good.
not get to say I'm right to him about this. I'm just making this clear.
Oh, that
Or
was that
That's
Saturday Night Main
okay.
Event or was that Raw at MSJ?
It was at Saturday night's main event, but he cut the promo.
The next
It
week
was
on Raw.
the 48 hours after. And again, it was a backstage
okay,
promo. It was with Seth. We have the video. We also
okay,
have the Cena video. When I did this, when I first said this, there's an element of luck to it, right? Because it's like, But when Cena did it, right, and you have two major stars kind of cutting the same line and kind of taking a little bit of a pause and inserting it there at the appropriate time as they're delivering a promo, that might be something.
All right, so Joe, I think we got to get you into the press conference at SummerSlam.
I
Right.
don't know if I'm burning my question on that one.
No,
Sorry,
I said
guys.
I
I don't
said we get Joe. I said we
know.
get Joe in there, not you, John.
Okay.
We
Oh,
get Joe in
okay.
there, and he could ask John Cena himself.
If you want to burn your question on that and face the ire of a bunch of other wrestling media members, then by all means, Joe,
I
go
mean,
in.
there's been worse questions.
There have
Way
absolutely
worse.
been worse questions. There
Yeah,
is no
100%.
doubt about that.
Yeah, I think that was who was the one that asked if Taylor Swift was going to get involved, and they
There
asked Io Sky, who she might align with after Survivor Series. And there's always some bad ones out there.
there certainly are.
Well, John, you don't ask any bad questions at all.
I
In
don't know
fact,
about that.
you ask great questions and you always deliver great answers. And
Appreciate that.
Nick and I are very certainly appreciative of you coming on with us. Again, it's been a long time coming. We're very happy to have you on. Thankfully, we also have a lot of connections, all three of us. So, John, continue the great work.
Thank you.
The weather is now turning. It's actually very, very nice outside. And I saw the weather forecast for the next week or so. Temperatures are going to be right around 60 and maybe a little bit higher. So even if it's not perfect outside, the weather here in New York
Yeah,
is turning. So
pretty good.
we'll be good. We're going to be rooting for the Knicks. The Rangers didn't make the playoffs, unfortunately, but we wish you the best of luck with everything moving forward at SNY. Say hi to everybody for us. What we do here is we always give our guests the last word. So we know there's still some places we can find you that we haven't discussed. And if there's anything else you would personally like to share, promote for yourself, by all means, go ahead. Thank you for the extra time. We went over an hour. It's a great hour. You were really, really great for us. And like I said, we just wish you the best of luck with everything. And, hopefully this will lead to some more collaboration and
Yeah.
partnership, down the line. I think the gears are turning and we could do definitely a lot of great things together, but enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy work tonight. And like I said, if there's anything else you would like to share or promote, by all means, go ahead.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a great conversation and always down to chat. I'm, as you can tell, I am very passionate about what I do. And I think one of my best qualities and one of my worst qualities is that I'm extremely passionate about the things that I love. And when it comes to blasting Springsteen around the house, I'm not sure that's always appreciated. But when it comes to talking about uh, this industry that sometimes you feel like you just hate it with every fiber of your being, but at the end of the day, you truly love the art of it, and I view it as an art. So to get a chance to talk about it is always something that I really appreciate, and thank you for having me. And if you enjoy New York sports, Sportsnet New York, SNY is the place to find me there. If you enjoy pro wrestling, I have the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy podcast, which I host. You can find wherever you get your podcasts. WrestlingAccordingToAlba.com, which is my wrestling Patreon, where we do Q&As. I do a tape study where we take a popular match or a recent match and we break it down move for move and talk about just the psychology and the architecture of the match itself. It's super fun. It's a great Discord there as well. WrestlingAccordingToAlba.com. I'm on the Takedown on SI doing pieces for that. And yeah, man, just kind of all over the place. So I appreciate you guys having me. It was a great chat.
John, we appreciate it. Best Springsteen song, Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
That's unfortunate that you feel
I'm
that
right
way,
about
but
that. Everything
that's
else is
not
trash
accurate.
from
But
Bruce
okay.
Springsteen.
You,
John,
you,
thank you for your time. This is going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our special guest, Jon Alba, my co-host, Joe Calabrese, I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.